What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another Bros Talking Soccer podcast. My name is Dave Knittel. I am here today interviewing JS Leatherbarrow from Football and the City. JS, hello.
Hi, Dave. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. If you are joining us live on YouTube, please feel free to say hello, interact with us as we go along here. I have the chat feature up in the background. And yeah, we're going to be talking about JS's website, a little bit about him. We'll be talking about his Tottenham fandom and also get into some Twitter questions we had, some about the FA Cup, some about lower league football in the US, football/soccer. JS, feel free to use whatever term you want. I'll probably use soccer for most of this, and I know that'll probably hurt your ears, but
it's fine.
Okay.
I'm kind of used to it by now. You know,
okay.
I think a bit like John from the Game of Fussy podcast was saying. He's sort of like he's kind of learned to accept it now. You know, so yeah.
Okay, well that's good. I like
At
to hear
least
that.
you have the game and it's growing in popularity. That's the main thing.
Exactly. That's what we all want. So
and maybe one day it will be popular enough for you just to call it football.
Maybe. We'll see. I don't know.
That would be fun.
So. Yes. All right, cool. So I think we're ready to get into the podcast again. Say hello, interact with us as we go along here. We'd love to hear from you. All right, I'd like to welcome on JS Leatherbarrow from Football and the City. JS lives in the UK and is founder and editor of Football and the City, which is a website telling stories worth telling about the beautiful game. It is linked in the video description and podcast show notes, and I highly recommend you checking it out. JS, welcome back to Bros Talking Soccer. How you doing today?
I'm very good, Dave. Thank you very much. Little bit coldy, so probably got I think I said somewhere yesterday, but a Barry White kind of voice going on at the moment. You know, apart from that, fine and dandy. How about you?
I'm doing well. Well, the lady listeners might like that, so so it's good you're rocking the Barry White voice. And did I get your
and some of the men
and some of the men? Yes, very true.
So,
you know what?
yeah.
Yes. Did I get your titles right? Founder and editor of Football in the City. Is that the right way to say those things?
I don't. It doesn't really matter.
Okay.
They're both true. So.
All right. So you're one of the most kind of interesting guests we've had on the podcast in the past. And so some of our long-term listeners will remember you living on a farm kind of that has peacocks in the English countryside. So I want to start there. Kind of, how did you end up on that farm?
I mean, like my parents lived up here on the estate, and I was living in London for forever basically. I just kept coming up and it was basically like paradise, and I kept kind of finding more excuses to come up, and then eventually it was like, yeah, I'm just going to move here. So I did, and yeah, it's stunning basically, so love it.
And you like that life?
It's not my estate, obviously, but the owners of the estate do have peacocks which regularly come to the garden, so you might hear my dog at some point. I've got a new dog since we last spoke as well. So
what kind of dog?
It's a collie. She's like 2.5. Basically, she was the world's worst sheepdog, so I kind of ended up with her. So animal sanctuary here, basically, for people's unwanted farm animals and things, you know, so chickens and yeah, all sorts.
All right.
True story. Bit of a difference from living in the city, you know.
And you prefer this lifestyle to living in the city?
Yeah. I mean, my family kind of moved up to Lincolnshire, which is like a county, so the equivalent of one of your states. When I was I don't know, about 7 or something. So I'm kind of used to it. And then I went back to the city when I was a bit older, and then kind of spent, I don't know, about 15 years there before coming back up. But yeah, probably just about prefer the countryside, but you can't get cocktails at 2 a.m. You know? You can't get anything after 12, actually, even taxis most of the time. So yeah, or cabs for your listeners. Yeah, right. So
it's a different lifestyle, but one you like. So I definitely want to get to your soccer projects and discuss your fandom. But before we do that, I remember in the past you've kind of dropped these little nuggets of your past lives, and I feel like you said you used to work in marketing and possibly the music business. So you're again.
Yeah. I worked in the music industry for quite a long time. I mean, did various bits. It was kind of bands and a bit of session musician work, and then I was like an artist manager and events organizer and stuff like that. So yeah, it was quite interesting. But by the end, it was actually largely kind of classical stuff. So it was like sopranos and things like that. So yeah, that was fun.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that's super interesting. So yeah, I wanted to get a little bit of background up until we met kind of over the summer. And so it sounds like, you know, that was kind of it. Anything else you want to share from that life?
I mean, change of pace, but I mean, I've always had a lifelong kind of love of football. I mean, I was sort of brought up in the game. My dad was like a coach for ages, and then he was a scout for Reading for like 16 years or something. And yeah, even my mum's a huge football fan. So you know, in back in the era when apparently women weren't really meant to like football and stuff like that. So I kind of like learned that lesson early on, that women know equally as much about football as men do. You know, so yeah.
Soccer was kind of in your blood.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, like some of my great uncles played for Reading and Crystal Palace, I want to say, and yeah, all sorts of stuff. Everyone basically, pretty much, and all of my brothers are completely football mad as well. So, you know, yeah, football crazy family on both sides, all sides. So didn't really have much of a choice on that one. And then my stepdad was later on, so also a Spurs fan, so that kind of helped. So you know, so
Nice.
yeah.
Awesome.
It was good in a household where my mum supported Chelsea, having me and my stepdad as the other two people in that household, both being Spurs, because it was like, you know, kind of you have someone to back you up always, and the kind of Chelsea Spurs thing. So, you know, a bit like you guys, like two of you are Liverpool and one of you's Man City.
We can gang up on that. Yeah,
that's what I mean. So it's like you and Christian can just be like, grr, you know, we win because there are more of us. It's as simple as that. So yeah, you know how it works.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing is City is so good and dominant that Matt kind of always has the trump card. But you know, hopefully that'll change this season. But you know, we'll see. So I didn't kind of ask you about this before we went live. So you know, you can answer or not. I'm not sure if this is an okay question to ask. But JS Leatherbarrow, I believe that's a pen name and not your birth name. No. I
mean that is my birth name. It's just I just use two of my initials. It's a James, but I go by JS. So like Stephen's one of my middle names, so it's JS. Leatherbarrow is simple as that, really.
Okay.
So
all right.
I mean actual real name, if that makes sense. So it's like it's not even a pen name really. It's just that kind of thing of, you know, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I remember over the summer we were using your name, and then you said, so I didn't know if you were, with the launch of Football in the City, did you kind of make the change over to going by your initials, or did you always kind of go by JS and it was more like a me issue?
That was like a school thing. So it's
okay.
It's kind of, you know, always been there or thereabouts, but it kind of, I don't know, it kind of sounds cool when you're doing writing and stuff as well. So it's like the old writers, you would have it, you know. So I quite like that as well. So I kind of just kept it to the sort of nicknamey bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love it, and your name sounds like a writer's name. It's an awesome name. So yeah, that's why I just wanted to get the backstory behind that. So
hopefully it reads like it as well, you know, the actual writing. So
it does. It is fantastic. And our listeners should definitely check it out. We have it linked in the video description and podcast show notes. So getting to that, over the summer, you launched Football in the City. Can you tell us about the website and kind of why you decided to launch the website in the first place?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was basically a kind of reaction against like a lot of the clickbait kind of football journalism that I felt was sort of poisoning a lot of attitudes towards the game. I mean, it's largely unhealthy because even kind of older newsrooms, you know, like well-established press outlets, struggle to kind of keep up with the advent of social media and digital and all of the rest of it. So they needed to find a way of justifying their existence and making them pay. So, you know, you hear these kind of horror stories now of really, really good older writers having their work kind of sideline or, you know, pushed to the back a little bit, because in place of like younger writers stuff that will generate more clicks, which to me isn't healthy. It should always be focused solely on the quality of the work as opposed to what is going to be the most widely read. From a business perspective, of course it makes sense, but then it doesn't mean you're getting the highest quality writing now. You know, another big move is like they almost universally would used to hire kind of like English graduates, right? So, you know, because they generally tend to be the people who write. So a lot of those graduates would have been people who, you know, wrote poems and plays and books and things like this. So their command of the language was fantastic, and you'd get a lot of very interesting stuff from really great writers. Whereas now there has been a move towards hiring people to create quote unquote content, copy, whatever you want to call it now, that are actually kind of like marketing and media graduates, which I suppose it kind of makes sense, but they're not really writers. They're literally just there to generate content as quickly as possible to turn over as much you know, traffic and revenue as possible. So I wanted to kind of create a place where it wouldn't be, you know, writing faux controversial stuff just to drive people to the website. It's always been more about kind of building something slowly and basing everything on quality, making sure everything is fact checked and verified within an inch of its life, and that the writing's as good as possible, you know, because I think people need that alternative as well. So, you know, I mean, there are really good writers left. I mean, you know that are very popular as well. You look at someone like Henry Winter, who writes for the Times. I mean, he's got something like 1 million something followers on Twitter. So I mean, there are clearly people out there who still want to read properly written, well researched, you know, stuff. It's not everyone. It's just kind of like, I feel that there needs to be more of it again, you know, and kind of slowly swinging back towards that way.
And that's a fantastic goal, and, you know, something very admirable. And, you know, that's what we love about your website. Now, do you have any, so that's kind of the why you launched. Do you have any specific goals that you're trying to achieve with it? Or is it just to maintain kind of the utmost quality? You know, do you have any specific goals for the website?
No, yeah, I mean, I want to grow it as much as possible, because I feel like it's for exactly the same reasons, though, if that makes sense. The more prominent that is, and the more people realize that actually, you know, a lot of the stuff they click on has been designed specifically for them to click on it, and that again, it's not a very healthy thing. It's kind of like, how to phrase it. I mean, for example, they know, and I know this because I've spoken with other journalists and people in existing newsrooms and things like this. They know that things that will create fear and, you know, kind of create anger and stuff, will be the stuff that will get shared the most widely, even if it's in like a way of, on Twitter, someone will share it and put, this is total bull, you know, I hate this here and all this. And they know, because it does generate the traffic, and that again, it's not healthy, and it's kind of leading to an entire generation getting very quickly angry at each other about things, because people, especially when you're younger, you do parrot things you read and hear. Of course you do. It's normal. We all did it. It's just when I was younger, it's just there wasn't that kind of stuff because the internet was in its infancy. You know what I mean? So it was kind of like the stuff we were parroting was more like, you know, interesting, deep stuff, not like my striker's better than your striker, lol, or like imagine rating Pele, or, you know, all this kind of bullshit like you see on a daily basis now. it's becoming normalized. So yeah, of course, with football in the city, I want to make it as massive and as big as possible. That wouldn't ever mean compromising on the quality of the work and so on and so forth. It just means to get it to a place where I can afford to pay more and more and more writers, to good writers, proper writers as well, to create more of the stuff and get more of that out into the world.
Do you ever break it down into maybe some more specifics? Like, I want to get out 4 stories per week, or I want to attract 3 new writers this year, or I want to hit certain metrics, or no, is it just kind of more the broad kind of?
It has to be organic, otherwise
Okay.
it will kind of lose its purpose. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I want to eventually, hopefully, be able to build it to sort of maybe start looking at other, not me doing it, because I don't really know enough about other sports, but applying that and setting other little cities up for other sports, and potentially even news and politics and all of the rest of it in the end, without resorting to, like I was saying, the kind of hysteria or the mad kind of hyperbole that goes on. You've seen it with, especially since, like, for example, in your country, Trump has come in, and in our country since the Brexit thing. There's no grey area. There's no nuance anymore. Everything's basically the worst thing in the world or the best thing in the world, isn't it? You know what I mean? It's like everything's either all evil or all good, and there's just there's no kind of room for subtlety with that kind of thing. So yeah, that is my goal. I mean, I've sort of been forced into starting to make a proper business plan for it, because I have had potential investors kind of coming forward and saying, "Can you send me your business plan?" I really don't have a business plan, but it's kind of got to the stage where I sort of need to, because I will, just completely run out of money at some point and end up starving, or having to get a real job again at some point. You know what I mean? It's kind of like it's not indefinite, so it will have to be this year, But yeah, probably good for maybe like another year or something at the moment. So not panic stations or anything yet, but having said that, I probably should start working on it properly.
Well, that's exciting. Investors are coming to you, and that's always the best case scenario. So that's really awesome to hear. So you've gotten some really incredible articles, some really cool interviews. I know I've read a ton of the stuff on your site. Do you have a favorite piece that you've gotten to do because of football in the city, or a favorite thing that you've gotten to do?
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's not a very I see a lot of interviews with kind of like Americans on like chat shows and stuff like this, and they say, "Oh no, I can't pick a favorite," and they're all very like not political, but what's the word? They're kind of like a bit more discreet about things. We unfortunately don't really suffer from that in England, so it's kind of like, yeah, I do. I mean, look, there's nothing I'd put on there that I don't genuinely love. That's it, with reference to what I was talking about before. But yes, probably like interviewing like Katiun, the head coach of the Iranian women's under 19s. Yeah, no, we forgot them 19s team, and it's because she's doing something in a society that hasn't necessarily traditionally been particularly great towards women, or societal attitudes towards women, and they're kind of like, it's almost like that kind of Velvet Revolution thing. They're kind of sneaking in little attitude changes by doing something, but not in a really obvious way, not in that kind of like fight the power and I hate you and this is just wrong, we're going to do this. but doing it almost by sort of changing attitudes from within the inside, you know, about what women can and can't do in that society, and empowering women through football. So yeah, I mean that's definitely my favorite one. I mean, you know, there's all the people on there are doing amazing things. There's like Pete Lowe, the guy who used to be in the Man City academy, and he's set up a thing called Players Net, where they're tackling kind of how young players are treated in the game, you know, in academies and things like this. And it's their whole sort of modus operandi is to push for a duty of care towards young players in the game. So, for example, like the last week or two, we've seen the allegations made against Craig Bellamy about bullying younger players in the Cardiff youth team and this stuff. That's exactly what they're sort of fighting against and working towards kind of ending that kind of essentially systematic abuse of younger players, and making sure they're looked after and making sure they're educated properly and prepared for life outside of football, because as we know, the fraction that makes it from the academy is, what is it, like 0.02% or something. It's a tiny number. So yeah, I mean, being able to tell stories like that don't generally tend to get covered as much in the sort of mainstream media, if you like. Yeah, is brilliant, basically. So.
Yeah, and that story, the first one that you referenced about the Iranian U19 coach is the one I was thinking of, and that's an incredible story. And then the second piece that you were touching on there is something kind of gets into what we in the US sometimes glamorize, that, you know, Europe and other places around the world put so much emphasis on professionalizing these kids, and we forget the human side of all of that.
Absolutely, yeah. Oh, hello. You've cut out a bit. Hello.
To be honest,
Oh, sorry. You cut out. You cut out. Then.
Yeah. My computer froze there.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
My fault. So I was saying, but in this country, we probably go the other way and probably focus maybe a little bit too much on the human aspect, and sacrifice maybe a little bit of the professionalism. But at the end of the day, I mean, the majority of these kids will not be professionals. So you need to really kind of balance those two things. And that's just from my perspective. So
it's still, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because you still need to make sure they've got sort of enough of a competitive edge to be kind of top level athletes. Of course, you need that. But I think what Pete Lowe and others are saying is that there is a way of doing that without essentially being abusive or bullying them or kind of wrecking their heads for life. You know, I mean, that was always his big thing, even when he was in the, you know, at the Man City academy. And you kind of look at that. He showed me a photo once of one of their teams just before they played like an FA Youth Cup game, and I'm pretty sure he said every single one of them ended up becoming professional footballers. Every single one of them. And I know that was a team with like Kieran Trippier and I can't remember off the top of my head, but I saw the photo and straight away I was like, I recognise about 5 of them. You know, being a Spurs fan, I obviously noticed, you know, Trips more than anyone else, but it was amazing. And you kind of think, you know, so obviously he is right, isn't he? You know, a lot of his kind of philosophy is about not kind of pushing them too much, but teaching them in a way how to be leaders in and of themselves, so they can take responsibility, they can make good decisions on and off the pitch. So that duty of care thing, it's still teaching them a really, really high level of professionalism, but it's essentially teaching them also how to, or helping to teach them how to fundamentally be decent human beings, you know, functioning adults, as opposed to some players that, I don't know, either they believe their own hype at 18 or whatever it is and never grow out of it, or they're just not taught right, you know. And you see it in some of the most ludicrously talented players like Neymar and stuff like this. And I mean, he could be a genius, that guy, couldn't he? But it's like, you know, he just is just clearly such a spoiled brat, and you kind of feel like he needed someone just to kind of not literally give him a slap. That's exactly what we're trying to get away from, but you know what I mean. He needed
Yes.
someone like Pete Lowe in his life when he was like 16, 17 to kind of help keep him grounded. And well, I wouldn't say he could be twice the player because he's a hell of a player, but you know what I mean. If he had the attitude, the right attitude, and the right preparation going into adulthood as a professional, oh God, it just, you know, yeah. I mean, it could have been at least as good as he is now, and probably a lot more loved than he is, and less divisive a figure, and arguably a better role model for young kids watching the game as well, because no one really wants to watch. You know, I mean, when I have kids, I don't want them. I don't want them watching players like Neymar as, you know, as one of the world's great players, and he is in terms of pure talent. I don't want them sort of looking up to him and sort of going, "Oh, is that right to, you know, roll over 50 times when you've barely been touched?" No, it king isn't. Absolutely not. That is not what you do. You know what I mean? Take the skill, not the attitude. Yeah. So, yeah.
And there's always, I think, throughout generations, there's been players that are better role models and ones that maybe aren't great.
Yeah.
And there's a delicate balance, you know, with developing them. So let's
Yeah. I mean, you're right. Of course. I mean, there have always been probably players you wouldn't necessarily want your kids to look up to. George Best, for example, maybe not the best example, but then there was still something a little bit more, I don't know, a little bit more down to earth about him. He was very human. He wasn't kind of like, for all of his faults. Yeah, but you're right. Of course there have been, you know.
So I know you don't love kind of talking about yourself, but I'm going to ask you to do it one more time here. I've been really impressed with your. Oh, is my computer frozen again?
No, it's
Okay.
mine.
No.
I don't think so.
Well, it's frozen on my end. There we go. Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. I've been really impressed with your social media game, specifically with Football in the City. You know, we first got connected over the summertime, and I think that was when you were just launching kind of it. It's already at 1,500 followers, and you've done it in a really kind of cool, interesting way. You know, I just wanted to know if you have any strategies or, you know, how do you approach social media?
It's exactly the same with the website. I mean, to be honest, if I decided tomorrow to kind of go all football Twitter, or what people call football Twitter, you could probably be on 50, 60,000 followers in a few months, couldn't you? But I've always found that a little bit hollow. It's got to be a kind of organic growth. Only follow people back that I actually speak to. So it's kind of like I don't do mass follow sprees or anything like that. So it's definitely a slower build, but it's more satisfying because you actually get to speak to people in depth about different clubs and different footballing cultures from around the world, and you learn so much more from it. So it's kind of like, in terms of strategy, no, it's more like just keep the quality as high as humanly possible, and just wait for the rest of the world to catch up. But you know, it's kind of like, so someone called it the best kept secret in football the other week, and I was kind of like, yeah, that's fine. It's like I don't want it to always be a secret, though. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not like I'm not ambitious for it, but it is like I said, it's for the reasons I said, and the only way of ensuring that happens is by doing it organically and keeping true to the principles from start to finish, you know. So because I'm trying to long term kind of influence how people even talk about football on Twitter, you know, ideally just to help generate healthier discussions and things like that, as opposed to resorting to calling each other nonces or whatever when you don't agree with someone's opinion, or someone, or like just you know, you've seen it. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've had it in the past, and you're pretty much the most polite person I've ever met in football journalism. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, I'm sure even you've had you know, your things where you've put out something really harmless and you'll still get attacked for it. You know what I mean? It could just kind of be like. But then that is the kind of beauty of the democratization of social media and all the rest of it. But where it doesn't work is where you can put, like, you know, FIFA didn't re-vote in Sepp Blatter, who was then suspended because of the corruption scandal. And Twitter's the one place in the world where you could just easily put a tweet out about it. Someone could just put, yeah, it didn't happen. Or, like, you know what I mean? Something you know is completely 100% established in facts, and someone will be like, yeah, that's bollocks, it didn't happen. Or, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I don't know, it's fun. So I'm trying to sort of vaguely encourage healthier, more polite debate. But I mean, even myself, I'll bite sometimes. I try not to, but when it's something like racism or homophobia or sexism, I will just occasionally. I mean, I swear on there as much as I do on here, so I will. I'm not so like. Just in case anyone hasn't come across football in the city before, I'm not so puritanical, you know, of spirit. So it's kind of like, you know, I don't want anyone to think it's a sort of holier than thou thing. Like, yes, you must be morally guided all the way through and never bite and be absolutely perfect. Of course not. Everyone has bad days and all of the rest of it. But overall, that's what I'm trying to do. And and of course, if I see someone who's like, I'll see something on the FIFA Women's World Cup post, and they'll post something like, "Get into the kitchen and make me a sandwich, bitch." I will happily go and tell them to fuck themselves. You know what I mean? Like, without a shadow of a doubt. What I wouldn't do is if somebody put something up like, you know, oh, Harry Kane is just a tap-in dive merchant or something. You know what I mean? I wouldn't tell someone to go and fuck themselves for that, because that's not worth it. You know what I mean? It's an idiotic opinion. You know what I mean? I might even call them an idiot, maybe. But you know what I mean? There's no point in being rude to people for expressing opinions you don't agree with, unless it's clearly harmful, I mean, genuinely harmful to another human being, i.e. racism, i.e. sexism, i.e. homophobia, etc., right? So
Absolutely. So we have that linked in the video description and podcast show notes, the Football in the City Twitter. So be sure to go check them out, give them a follow, and interact with JS on there. He's a fantastic follow, so highly recommend that. All right. Enough talking about yourself, which I'm sure you're a little bit relieved at. Let's talk about Tottenham.
Look, we've discussed this before on here, but English people are just awful. I've sort of got a bit better over the last since we last spoke a few months ago, but not much better, as you can probably tell. I'm still a little bit, you know, you'll see me come to life probably a bit more on the things that aren't me, basically. So I'll just be 1 second, literally. Hang on, sorry.
All right, no worries.
Sorry, apologies for that.
No worries.
Yeah, sorry.
All right. So yeah, I want to talk about Tottenham now. So you said your mother was a Chelsea supporter, and your father was a Reading scout. So how did you end up as a Tottenham supporter in the first place?
Just the area of London, basically. Okay. So, you know, it was
so you're from North London?
Yeah, originally. So, I mean, it's only ever going to be Arsenal, Spurs, basically. You know.
And how'd you go Spurs over Arsenal? Is it specific neighborhood or something like that?
I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
probably not. It's probably is. I mean, like Seven Sisters Road, for example, Highbury. I mean, it's kind of like not quite equidistant, but near enough. So it's sort of like that. And it was kind of like reinforced because, like I said, when we moved up to Lincolnshire, it was long story short, but because my grandparents bought a pub, and for some reason, almost like everyone in there were Spurs fans as well. And then my stepdad was a Spurs fan, and my uncle, through my dad's marriage to one of his wives, um, he was Spurs as well, and we were pretty much the same age, even though he was technically my uncle. So it was kind of like, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like you don't really understand football when you're 5 or 6. But then when you see like everyone else as well, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, yeah, it just kind of reinforced it all basically. And then I didn't really have a choice really after that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is good, to be honest, because I could have ended up being, I mean, it would have been United at the time. You know, maybe Liverpool was still well, I mean, they still are a huge club. Don't get me wrong, but what I mean is, it was just after their kind of last golden era in the 80s. You know, so it was kind of. Yeah, and then it was like the birth of the United thing. So I'm kind of actually really thankful that it's always been Spurs, because I know as a consequence, I've never been a complete insufferable bore as a football fan. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, because we just haven't won enough in my lifetime to be one of those kind of like really boastful football fans. You know what I mean? So yeah. I mean, I'm sure you feel like slapping Matt like half the time you speak to him about City. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and
what can you say? You know what I mean? It's like, it's like, yeah, well, we've won this, and the last time Liverpool won anything, you haven't even won the Premier League, and blah blah blah. You know what I mean? You just sat there like, oh yeah, that's true. That is so depressing. You know.
Luckily, luckily Matt.
Mind you, you won the Champions League in relatively living memory, so you know what I mean. That's kind of like, yeah. So
yeah, luckily Matt isn't too bad with that. I mean, when he has a couple drinks, he'll get a little more boastful. But beyond that, I worry more about if Liverpool
Matt,
wins.
it's Christian, isn't it?
Exactly. I'm a Liverpool fan with Christian, and I'm worried.
I love Christian, but he's just gonna, he's just gonna be interminable if you guys win.
I know, and that's the annoying thing sometimes, because I support Liverpool, but I'm not one of those fans like over the top talking about the history or whatever. Like, I kind of like them because when I came into the fandom, they were almost kind of the underdog, and then I learned about their history, and I kind of chose them for their colors and for Gerrard, and then I learned about their history and learned about all this, and that sort of reinforced like my decision. But I don't like hold on to that because I wasn't paying attention to them back in their glory days. I kind of think of them as this, club that hasn't won a ton.
No offense, but you're not old enough, are you?
Exactly.
Like me and Spurs. So yeah. I think weirdly, I think there's like I've always had a huge soft spot for Liverpool. Still do. I think like some of your sort of like your fan base are absolutely crazy online. Oh my god, that 2-2 draw at Anfield last year. Spurs and Liverpool, it just never was a thing ever before that game. And you're like, it's a 2-2 draw, and now you've got fans going like, oh, I actually hate Spurs worse than Man United or Everton. You're just like, no, that's not how it works. It's a 2-2 draw. It's a 2-2 draw. What is wrong with you people? You know what I mean? Yeah, sure, be pissed off if you think Kane dived. I'm fine with that. You know what I mean? Target all your anger towards Kane, but you can't just suddenly hate a club after like 125 years of history, or you know what I mean, on one drawn game. You didn't even lose, Oh my god, you guys are nuts. Like, it's in a good way as well, because like, you see the sort of passion and the love and stuff. I just think sometimes it spills over a little bit, right? So it's kind of like, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I'd agree with it. So, how do you feel about Spurs this season? Do you think that they're going to stay kind of in the title race till the end? Do you think they'll get the first trophy under Poch, whether it's the League Cup, FA Cup, or what do you think?
I don't know. It's very tough to say. I mean, again, I'm like the archetypal Spurs fan. I just kind of like I love it, and I'm not a moaner. I'm what half of our fan base derogatorily refer to as a happy clappers. So I'm like generally supportive of the board and the chairman and all of the rest of it because, in my opinion, no offense to the Enoch Out Brigade, but I think you'd have to be a bit of an idiot to see, not to see where we were 15 years ago as a club and where we are or where we're about to be as a club. And the progress is just so evident when you look at the stadium and all of the rest of it. But what I would say is that's why I was prefacing it is because I still have that very Spurs thing of like I just assume something will go wrong at some point. You know what I mean? You can't get rid of a lifetime of that. Even if we won the Champions League 5 years running, I'd still be waiting for some disaster to strike or something. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's tough, isn't it? Because you sort of like you'd have to assume City are probably going to beat Burton Albion over 2 legs in the semi-final of that. We've only got a 1-0 lead to take away to Stamford Bridge. And as we well know, those are the 2 clubs over the last kind of decade plus. Well, no, it's more like 15 years-ish for Chelsea, have just got unlimited money, and we just don't have that. And you kind of look at the quality of Chelsea, and Sarri is a very, very good manager, and you kind of think, even if we get through that hurdle, the chances are, and I'd love it if Burton won, not because I dislike City, I don't at all, but because it would just be one of those kind of fairy tale things, But then it would be so typical of Spurs as well. If we got to like another final, we'd probably end up losing Spurs. But in a way, I sort of wouldn't begrudge that. But it's like, but the reality is it's probably going to be City. So it's kind of like, even if we get through Chelsea, our sort of prize would be playing City in the final. And that would, again, it's going to be a tough ask with the kind of, wealth of resources. And, I mean, they're the kind of club who could sit like 350 million pounds worth of talent on their bench, and that would literally not weaken their first team. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Whereas,
it's crazy.
I think our entire squad net costs like, it's about £2 million or something. Someone did it, with other player sales. In total, what this team costs, it was about £2 million. So, yeah, I don't think so. In the title race, so I think like I've still got an inkling City are going to come very strong second half of the season, and I hate to say it, but I still see them overhauling Liverpool. Because I again, I mean, you spent a lot of money in the summer, but again, a lot of your squad you've built up on the Coutinho money and all of the rest of it. You have spent, unlike us, extra money, which is good, and it seems to have been invested well. But I think it might just be one season too soon. I think. I mean, the deeper you go into like the Champions League again and stuff, I kind of feel like you still don't quite have the same level of squad as City do. Probably as witnessed in the FA Cup against Wolves the other night. I mean, you still you still had a team capable of beating Wolves, and it was actually a really competitive game. To be fair, it wasn't like you got hammered or anything. But I just feel like maybe the Championship is probably just one season on again from you, you know. And as for Spurs, no, I don't think we've got the squad to do it. We'll get top four. I think the top three now will be the top three at the end of the season. I just wouldn't want to put any money on what order the top two are going to be, or even top three actually, because it could be one of those weird things where like you get into the final of the Champions League again, that starts to affect your league games, and somehow we overtake you and get second. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
I Spurs, no. Liverpool, maybe. I just think City will have too much second, you know, when it gets to the business end of the season in terms of resources available to them, in terms of players and everything else. I just think they're probably going to overhaul Liverpool, and they'll definitely finish ahead of Spurs. So yeah,
I think that's a fair assessment. All right, let's get to some Twitter questions. We went down a weird rabbit hole a little bit with Twitter questions, so I'm going to ask the ones that I think were legit questions, and maybe one or two fun ones. But if I miss any, I apologize. But all right, let's start with at Caversham United. Can you debate why our nearest professional club, Reading FC, will never acknowledge our existence? We don't need to do that, but everyone should tweet at Reading FC to get them to acknowledge them. But they said, on a more serious note, thoughts on the longevity of the FA Cup in its current format. How can you make big teams take it seriously? What should the rewards...
Can I just say about Caversham very quickly?
Yep, sure.
Like they're followed by like Bayer Leverkusen and Roma,
yeah.
Cologne, and you know all these teams. So I'm not sure Reading's like the biggest miss on that list. No offense to Reading, because I've got a lot of family connections to the club and I do love the club, but I don't think they're going to miss Reading. But Reading will acknowledge them sooner or later. That's what I'm going to say. Yes, they will.
All right, there you go. All right, yeah. Caversham United.
Yeah, FA Cup. I actually think we should scrap the League Cup in this country. I think it's long outgrown its purpose. I don't know how aware you are of its history, Dave, but
in the 70s, right? It was created in the 60s/70s, late 60s, 70s.
I think it was like earlier. I think it was like 60 or 61. So, okay. I mean, it's old enough. I mean, especially when you think about how old the MLS is in your country, that probably sounds ancient. But then when you consider the FA Cup's been around since 1871, there's, to us, 1960 isn't that old in relative terms. So the reason, so for the benefit of the viewers, essentially it was founded because they were talking about reducing the number of top flight teams. So they came up with the League Cup as a way of reducing the lost revenues that were going to come from having, you know, less league games, obviously, because fundamentally the money to clubs then all came through the gates. You know, it wasn't like the mega money now. They didn't have huge money TV deals and stuff like that, or they hadn't. I mean, we've always been miles behind America in that regard. Like we've only, do you know what I'd even say? We've only really caught up in the last kind of 10 years learning how to leverage almost every single possible thing for sponsorship deals, you know. I mean, like, you look at United now, and to me, growing up and now seeing like Chevrolet sponsoring their seats in the dugout, it just seems, it's like alien to me. I know that's kind of normal in your sports culture and has been for a long time, but over here that is so relatively recent. So it was all the money came from gate receipts and stuff like that, you know. So they came up with the League Cup as a way of, you know, giving additional revenue to the clubs and stuff like this, so they wouldn't be struggling. And that was a kind of very laudable thing at first, and you can understand why they came up with the idea. But they ended up not reducing the league anyway, and they ended up keeping the cup. So it was like we had this thing that never really actually had any material function at any point in its history. You know, and now you kind of look at all of the extra games clubs play, especially in the Premier League, and especially the clubs playing in Europe, because again, in Europe at the time, the Champions League, or the European Cup as it was called, was more or less quite literally the champions of certain countries. So it was like straight knockouts and stuff like this. They introduced groups. I don't know when, but it was a little bit later on. So they were playing way less games than we do now. We don't need it. We just don't need it. It just doesn't make sense. And even for the, you know, the Championship down to Division 2, all you do is beef up the prize money in the FA Cup. It would be amazing for the game. It will add the sparkle back to the FA Cup, because the FA Cup here was like your kind of Super Bowl in America. You know, it was like a big day that everyone got really excited about and joined in, and you know, you'd watch the whole thing all day. You'd watch the build-up shows, you'd watch people arriving at the stadium, and they'd interview fans walking up Wembley and all of the rest of it. And now it's just kind of like, oh yeah, the FA Cup finals on. It's not.
So it's just as simple as getting rid of the League Cup, and you think the big teams will take it more seriously?
Yeah, definitely. That will help with that. Of course it will, because if there's suddenly only one other trophy they can win apart from the league, I think that's great. I think that's a great thing. I mean, you know, sponsors' advertising revenues would not only double for the FA Cup, or not double, but all of the revenue, sponsorship money that would have gone into the League Cup would then be put into the FA Cup. But even from a kind of like, and I hate looking at football from that angle, but in a very modern way, it would strengthen its brand so much that the advertising revenues would rocket anyway. So the clubs, you know, like the Championship clubs and stuff, for whom it does make way more sense than Premier League clubs, who don't need the money, and they could probably do without the extra games, they'd be getting so much more from the FA Cup anyway, you know? I mean, it just makes sense. It makes so much more sense. It would be more competitive. You know, that's my solution to it. I've heard loads of things like give the other Champions League place to the FA Cup and stuff like this, but I don't know. But then, having said that, I'd quite happily get rid of the Europa League as well, and and just bring it back to a straight Cup Winners' Cup as we used to have, and then just have the Champions League. Potentially even reduce the number of teams in that as well, because that is also a little bit ridiculous. And I'm fine, because it you know, there's always that nice thing about, you know, teams from kind of smaller countries and stuff, like they get involved in stuff like this. And you know, like we discussed about the World Cup being expanded, and actually I've come full circle on that. I remember I was saying to you, actually, I think it weakens the quality and blah, blah, blah. Actually, now, having interacted with more fans and stuff from around the world, you can see the kind of joy football brings to them. So if their nations are involved, I love that. I would love it. I would love it even more if it had come out of like a genuine place from, say, FIFA or UEFA or whoever else, you know, about genuinely trying to kind of like bring people into the game and making it more inclusive. Whereas we really know whenever they say that stuff, what they mean is we're trying to open up more new markets so we can make more money. We can sell TV packages to more countries and sell more advertising and stuff. You know what I mean? It's not more inclusive. It's just making them more money. So I kind of feel like it's a bit of a sort of poison chalice, bittersweet, poisoned apple, I should say. I think, you know. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I do personally. What about you? Do you have any thoughts on it?
No, so you know, I'll leave it to you. We're running a little bit longer here, so I like your suggestion. My thought was maybe give a Champions League spot, but for me, I don't. I'm not as close to the situation, and I just like to see it. You know, teams and fans and media take it more seriously. So I'd like your suggestion. We'll leave it at that. Next Twitter questions from @DFCSTC, which is Dynamo FC St. Cloud. They want to talk about what's the importance of supporting lower league soccer / football? What is the United States currently missing out on with its current system? I'm not sure how much you would know about the latter part, but specifically the first part, you know, what do you think about supporting lower division soccer?
I mean, I think basically this is another thing I've kind of learned quite a lot more about since we spoke about it last year. Essentially, when you've got a closed market, that's not good for competition. It's not good for anything in your game. I mean, how can it be? You've got the teams, and occasionally you might add a franchise or vote a franchise in or something, but you can't get relegated. You can't get relegated from a division. So you can have the shittest team in the entire country, and they can finish bottom of their division for like 20 seasons running, although they might start questioning it. But essentially, if they're, you know, say it's like, God, who's that amazing team that keep getting like the record crowds and all this stuff last season? I'm trying.
United?
Huh?
Atlanta
Yeah,
United?
yeah, Atlanta, right. So let's be real about this. How well supported they are. If they keep getting those crowds, and again, it's a money thing, isn't it? They're not getting relegated or voted out of the division, even if they finish bottom every single year for the next 4,000 years. They're not getting voted out of the league whilst they're bringing that kind of revenue into it. It's just never going to happen, and that cannot be healthy. You know, you need, for me personally, you desperately need the thing of relegation and division. You need it, otherwise your game is just going to keep being stagnant as it is. You know, it's just not good. It's not good for the development of the game in general. It's just not. There's nothing good about it, and you know, it would help other clubs that don't have as much money be able to get rid of your pay to play system for younger players. So more talented footballers, young footballers, soccer players, would have a chance of actually becoming professionals. You know, it's kind of like we all know this. We all know economic disadvantages and stuff in America. You know what I mean? We know that's gonna leave a big disadvantage very specifically on like young immigrant kids. So for example, where football's traditionally huge, and like, you know, people coming in from like Latin American countries, Mexico, and also young black kids trying to make it in the game, because they tend to be where most of the sort of social deprivation is. And as if history's taught us anything, it's that South Americans and black kids can play football pretty well. You know what I mean? That's tongue firmly in cheek. Let's put it more blankly. They're often fucking brilliant at it. You know what I mean? So you're missing out on that whole subsection of society when they can't even afford to get into the game. I mean, that is crazy to me. And I understand why teams outside the MLS have to do it to cover their costs. They can't afford to just suddenly pay, you know, a kid 25,000 a year to go and travel and train. Well, 50,000 probably, isn't it? I think you said before, maybe like a sort of rough. I mean, yeah, I'm talking about for like the flights and the hotels and the registration, insurance.
Not per year. So who just came out and said, I think the Pulisic, the youth academy director, where Christian Pulisic came up, said it costs about $300,000 to fund a team at one of the more competitive age groups. So say you have about 20, 25 kids at that age. So you're looking at roughly, what is that, $10,000 to $20,000 per kid.
Okay, but
there.
that includes like travel.
Yeah, that
hotels,
includes all.
Right,
Yeah.
sure. Okay, I forget how cheap flights are in America. It's ridiculous.
Depending on where you're going and when, they can be.
The train, though, isn't it? A lot of the time, especially if you're going like coast to coast or something like that. You know?
I can't imagine somebody wants to go coast to coast on a train. That would take maybe 3 or 4 days.
You know. So, but yeah, but that's oh, that's interesting. Is it Pulisic, like sick at the end?
So he pronounces it Pulisic. It's not. Yeah, his ancestors obviously came from, I think, somewhere in Eastern Europe, and it would have been pronounced that way. But his name has been Americanized, and that's what he said.
So actually, now he's coming to Chelsea. We actually have to call him Pulisic.
Whatever he says, or whatever you guys want to call.
We call him Pulisic in this country largely, but that's the good one to know that, of course, because he's American. I mean, you know far more about it than I do, but it's a bad one, isn't it? It's not a good situation you guys are in, you know.
Absolutely, and listeners will know a lot of my thoughts. We could have an entire, probably hour, 2-hour discussion on this. So I'll just leave my thoughts where they are. If you want to check them out, you can go to our website and look for some past episodes where I discussed all of those things, or we can talk about it on a different podcast. But JS, is there anything I didn't ask before I ask you my final question that you wanted to talk about today?
Not really, no. I mean, I've kind of covered the sort of growing racism or incidents of racism in the game in England again, and it's just horrific, you know. I mean, that's the main thing dominating a lot of the non-actual football chat at the moment in England. It's just reared its head, and we'd actually had a relatively long period of it not really being as much of a thing, but it just seems at the moment it's kind of like bang, bang, bang. Over the last kind of month, 6 weeks, it just seems to have exploded again. It's deeply depressing. But no, nothing apart from that, you know.
Okay, so. No worries. I mean, and with all of the negativity and just bad things happening kind of in the world and in soccer, we try to take and end it on a positive note. So I end it with asking my guests, what's the thing you're most excited about kind of happening in the soccer world for you? You can take it any way you want: Spurs, football in the city, something else. What's the thing you're most excited and positive about happening in your soccer world?
Women's World Cup this summer. It's in France, so it's kind of like I really feel like that's going to be a watershed moment for the game in our country. I mean, this season has been great because like Man United have kind of joined in the professional game, and clubs like Roma in Italy are doing it now. I mean, the women's football is in better shape than it's ever been in, and a little unlike, you know, American or football in America, I should say, not American football, obviously. Football in America, you know, you kind of get these peaks and troughs, don't you? You kind of get a burst of everything, like, yeah, it's about to really break through, and then it kind of doesn't. It sort of feels like the women's game really is breaking through here now. There's so much more coverage. They've even got their own women's football yearbook now, which is just amazing. It's kind of rival the traditional men's one we've always had here. But the Women's World Cup, yes, it's going to be amazing. I just hope Ada Hegerberg decides to reverse her decision and go and play in it. So,
I hadn't heard that. She's not going to play?
No, I'm trying to remember why, actually.
Interesting.
I can't remember why, but I knew she said she wasn't going to. Can't remember why. I'm just hoping she might reverse the decision. give me literally 1 second. I'm just going to have a quick check of why, just so the listeners, although I'm sure they can use
yeah, and I'll give the listeners a background. Ada is the Ballon d'Or winner, first female Ballon d'Or winner. She is 23. I don't know if she's still 23. She's 23 or 24. Norwegian attacker. She has been, a part of her national team since she was a teenager, and so she would be entering her prime. So this is kind of a surprising thing for me to hear that she wouldn't be at the biggest kind of women's event in the world.
Just trying to find it. Where is it? Just 2 seconds.
All right.
I found a link that doesn't seem to have anything on it, which is useful. So, why are you not going to the World Cup? She won't be representing Norway at next year's World Cup. Blah 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 blah. Where are we? She says it's to do with the way women's football is treated in Norway and ongoing kind of like sexist attitudes towards women. So she's going to kind of use her voice, well, not voice, but by protesting, by not going, which seems to still be the case, by the way. So
hopefully her stance causes a change and she will be at the game, but I know we're going to be looking forward to the Women's World Cup.
Mind you, I kind of feel like her thing with Martin Solveig at the Ballon d'Ors actually helped spark a lot of discussion around that, and 99% of people I saw were very supportive of her in the wake of that. So yeah, hopefully, to be honest though, I'd rather just see her there because she is one of the world's 2 or 3 best players at the moment. So yeah, obviously you want to see the best players at the World Cup, don't you? So yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, JS, thank you so much for being here today and joining me and being interviewed. Anything else you would like to say?
I'm good. Thanks, Dave.
All right, listeners, make sure to go check out footballandthecity.com. We have it linked in the video description and podcast show notes. Also, be sure to follow Football and the City on Twitter. What's the handle? I'm trying to get it up. @ball. Oh, do you know it?
Yeah, it's @ball in the city.
There you go. So again, that is also linked in the video description and podcast show notes.
Football in the City was 1 character or 2 characters too long or something. So I meant to say goodbye and thank you very much for having me on. So I didn't realize that was kind of that moment when you said that. Yeah, like that.
Of course. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, listeners and viewers. Thank you for being here, and we will talk to you this weekend. Say, everybody. All right.